With me now is Jim Owens, who is Chairman and CEO of Caterpillar. He is also a driving force on the Council on Competitiveness, one of the co-chairs of the DRIVE initiative itself. Jim, good to have you with us today.
Nice to be here.
Let's talk first of all about the DRIVE initiative, which is released just today, the result of the three arms of the Council and a different lens looking at the same issue in all three.
Right, well, from a Caterpillar perspective, I was pleased to provide some leadership to this because I think it's important as a country that we look at the challenge of the environment and sustainability, energy, and global competitiveness together. It's a very integrated set of policies needed, and you know, we can't look at this through a single lens. I'm a little concerned sometimes in the environmental community we look at cleaning up our environment without regard to the need to compete in the global economy. I guess my feeling is we can do both the above. And it's not only that, it's critically important for our country long term that we do both of the above. So we are, I was very pleased to participate. As you mentioned, this includes universities around the country, leading research institutions. It includes organized labor and the corporate sector. And we, Caterpillar, we play in this in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously we're a leading provider of equipment, both diesel engines and gas turbines and construction equipment for the global energy industry, if you will. That would be coal, oil and gas, both production and distribution. We invest very heavily in energy technology ourselves. Surprises most people know we're the third largest producer of kilowatts. And we've spent several $1 billion on low emissions for our engines and turbines. In fact, dramatic improvements over the last 20 years in their NOx and particulate emissions, and really remarkable, but a huge investment on our part to play our role there. And of course, we are big consumers of energy in our manufacturing operations around the world. We spend over $300 million a year just on utilities. So being energy efficient and being very conscious of that is important to us. So I really like the way the council's brought this work together. We've heard a lot of voices from the environmental community, from manufacturing industry, government policymakers, and come up with some very definitive recommendations. As a country, we have a lot of opportunity. We're consuming about 25% of the world's kilowatts with 5% of the world's population. So we have to be a lead player in global environmental issues.
Well, let me ask you this, Jim. How has that view crystallized for you over the events of the last 12 to 18 months with the global recession and Caterpillar being so closely tied to manufacturing and production in very broad terms, and the issue of U.S. competitiveness when there is a global downturn?
Well, I think the wealth of nations is determined ultimately by your competitiveness and your ability to compete in the world market. I think it's critically important for the United States as a country to focus on being open and transparent. We should force our companies to compete with the best ideas, the best technologies, the most productivity in the world. And that's how we'll be a great country. So we need to nurture and encourage, and not protect our companies. We need to force them then to compete. And so that's a dimension of this whole effort that I like a lot. We talked briefly before about U.S. CAP. We've been a part of that initiative.
Climate Action Partnership.
And one of the reasons I wanted to be a part of that is because I don't think we can afford to do a cap and trade system that's rigorous just within the United States. It really has to be a global initiative, and we have to provide leadership for that on a global scale. Certainly we have to be willing to do our part, but we need a price on carbon in order to drive the right kind of economic decisions by millions of consumers around the world and businesses around the world. And so getting an effective price on carbon is what the whole U.S. CAP initiative was about, and doing it in a way that didn't diminish our ability to compete in world markets as a manufacturing country. Most Americans have kind of think we don't manufacture anymore, but au contraire. At least airplanes and medical equipment and construction equipment and engines. Last year in Caterpillar, more than half of our employment in the U.S. was dependent on exports. We exported from the United States $16 billion worth of products. And we need to preserve, that's a lot of jobs, and we need to preserve our ability to compete in the world market and to supply products which are environmentally effective.
Jim, I'm still surprised to some degree about the role that the U.S. CAP blueprint for climate legislation has had. I was there for the rollout in January when you and your fellow CEOs and leaders gathered together to present this. And so many of the facets included in your blueprint are in the Waxman-Markey legislation that passed the House and should soon be forthcoming in the Senate as well. Were you surprised about the influence that blueprint had? It is remarkable that so many of the numbers, the exact numbers, coincide.
Well, I thought a lot of thought went into it. There's a pretty broad coalition of leading environmental groups and corporate America that were involved in the U.S. CAP initiative. Didn't come easily that we agreed to those basic framework principles, but I think the fact that it did have such diverse interests who had spent a lot of time together trying to work out things that made sense for our country long term and stayed focused on staying internationally competitive. My only concern with the legislation is that, that it was a bit unilateral in that we might move forward aggressively with the cap and trade system without the rest of the world joining us. We need to certainly show our willingness to move forward. We need to encourage other nations to come forward. But if we drive a huge amount of cost in this country that is out of line with the rest of the world, it's going to be difficult to maintain our competitiveness. And that's kind of a lot of the things that DRIVE was about. It was suggesting ways that we can, if you will, have our cake and eat it too. We need cost competitive energy. At the same time, we need to clean up the environment. And these two things are not mutually exclusive.
Jim, one final question for you. The guessing game in Washington, of course, is when will the Senate address climate legislation? When will a cap on carbon be enacted, if or when? But I heard Jim Rogers with Duke Energy last week saying that we are proceeding as if there were already a cap on carbon. Is Caterpillar operating to some degree the same way in advance of policy?
Well, we're investing very heavily right now in getting our products ready for Tier 4 emissions compliance. In fact, it's probably 70% of our research and engineering dollars is geared to that mission alone. That's taking about another 90% out of an already clean engine emissions, and that's particulates and NOx related. So there's still carbon dioxide. I'd like to see the United States focus on energy efficiency, thermal efficiency, for example. And I think we need to continue to work to think about energy efficiency, thermal efficiency, smart grids, alternative sources of power. One of the things I like about the DRIVE initiative is, we've said we got to get on with things like carbon capture and sequestration.
Right.
These have to be, we recommend that we do 10 commercial scale projects, which will have to be subsidized initially, to demonstrate the capability, because our country is still dependent on the natural resource that we have in this country, coal, to generate a lot of electricity. We need to find clean coal technologies that work for us and that create jobs and sustain competitiveness in this country. So these initiatives all tied together. Same with nuclear energy. I know a bad word to some in the environmental community, but we've not built a single nuclear plant since 1979. It's less than 20% of our total power generation comes from nuclear, so we're way behind other countries. And I think it's proven to be safe, and certainly it doesn't create carbon dioxide. And it's got to be part of the mosaic that we consider to have cleaner energy and to have cost competitive kilowatts that allow us to compete in the world market.
Sounds like
these two things have to go together.
So it is all part of the all of the above strategy, it sounds like. Jim Owens is Chairman and CEO of Caterpillar and a driving force behind the private sector aspect of the Council on Competitiveness. Jim, thanks for taking time with us today.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
Much appreciated.